both sides of the globe, both sides of the states this past weekend. I was in Las Vegas for Canelo Kovalev. We'll get to that later. Chuck Mindenhall and Luke Thomas were inside Madison Square Garden, NYC for UFC 244. The main event being this, I can't believe it happened, the BMF championship bout with Jorge Masvidal scoring a third-round TKO over Nate Diaz following a doctor stoppage due to 2 cuts in the vicinity of Nate Diaz's right eye. So, Chuck, so many angles, so many things I want to break down, from the stoppage to everything else.
Okay.
But just from what this fight offered fans, BMF, baddest mother effer in the land. Did this deliver to the insane expectations that when you get Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal on a cage, did it equal that?
I think it did. I think it did in the end. Masvidal coming out to the Scarface theme, it just kind of transforms the building. I thought that Nate Diaz's walkout was really cool. So then they get in there, and right away, I'm sure you were able to watch it where you were at, but right away, you get, Masvidal knocking Diaz, almost knocking him out. It kind of set the tempo for the fight. And from there, I just felt like if they grappled, if they did anything like normal MMA, if you saw game plans in play, I thought it was going to tarnish a little bit. But for some reason, these guys are who they are, and they were going to fight the way they fought. And I thought the crowd really bought into it. And you had The Rock over there bouncing with the belt on his shoulder the whole way. It felt very pro wrestling in that way.
Roberto Duran walking in.
Roberto Duran, the president, was there, which got a mixed reaction. It was quite a scene, but I thought both guys really, they lived up. There's a lot of expectation for those guys, and I thought they lived up to it.
I got to take a quick L here, and I've never been afraid in my life to sit down on that L and show you that I took it.
You love the L's.
Coming in, I had sort of criticized, look, you're picking 2 counterculture heroes that both play the same position in the marketing. What we didn't have for this fight was essentially mano-a-mano, 2 guys that wanted each other's throat, and I thought that would potentially kill some of the buzz, not allow the fight to reach its ceiling of buzz. What I didn't expect coming in when I actually watched the fight, Chuck, was just how happy I was for them. Just how much this turned out to be like a babyface story in pro wrestling, like going full circle and coming there. You have 2 guys that were anti-establishment, that were so stuck in their beliefs on how they do things and going up against the machine that they changed by not changing at all for so long that the machine turned around and embraced them.
That's exactly
right. And
I
didn't expect to get those feels. And then when they walk into the cage, it was just such joy. It was basically the purest form of why we love fights. We love it for the skill and who's the champion, who's the best pound for pound. Some people just love it for the violence and the pageantry, but this was just that pure mano-a-mano. And to see Jorge Masvidal rush forward and pump fake the running knee to start, and to see those little moments of just genuine interplay between them, it was like, this was like this badass Super Bowl that I never would have guessed happened. And, you look at Masvidal's journey to get here. Hitting that sort of crossroads moment a couple years ago, being on that reality show in the middle of nowhere, his career kind of at a certain point, and just decided, I'm going for it. I'm just going all in on it. And to see him get to this point, same thing with Nate to be embraced by the company, I caught the feels and I didn't expect it.
UFC had to bend over for this one, didn't they? Because I think that by default, almost, and by Nate's idea to do this, the BMF thing, it came together. But if there was a viable title in play that they could have plugged into MSG, the UFC would have done it. This thing only existed because of timing and circumstance, and Nate Diaz bringing up the idea, and people kind of clamoring to see this thing come together. I know there was a lot of talk about the 165 division. This was kind of in lieu of that, because I think Dana being so stubborn against the 165, it wasn't going to be an option. He wasn't going to bend over quite that much. But I think when it all came together and they were in whatever meeting, it was the right move to just do this. It was very different. It shook up the paradigm. I feel like we still don't know exactly what it'll mean going forward, but it was a lot of fun, and I thought that, I really think that even though it kind of ended anticlimactically, it kind of fulfilled everything that you were hoping it would.
It turns out we had central casting. We had the right 2 people for the fight. They walked in there, looked in each other's eyes, and were like, if you got a big, let me search it. I mean, they wanted to find out who's more man in there, and I can get down for that. But the stoppage, damn stoppage. Round 1, basically a round of the year contender. Full violence throughout those first 3 rounds. Your thoughts on the New York State Commission's stepping in and waving this off?
So you could see the cut. I mean, I'm sitting there looking at the cut, but we have context with Nate Diaz, do we not? Like, we've seen this guy bleed in multiple ways and in ghastly ways. We have that context. I feel like if it's in Nevada or some other place, they might have that context.
Tyson Fury's cut.
Exactly. But here you are in a situation where you're in New York, They probably don't have this context, right? And I felt like that was the first disconnect. You have a diehard audience that really knows who Nate Diaz is. They know he's going to fight through it. They know that is not going to slow him down. And then you have this threat that ended up ending the fight. And I felt like that was kind of the disconnect between what was going on with people's expectations, what they wanted versus what the reality was with the commission. I still think he could have answered the bell. I mean, the cut was bad, don't get me wrong, but I'm pretty sure he could have fought through that and made it through.
I think people need to understand the New York State Athletic Commission's stance right now, for better or worse, right? A couple years, 5, 6 years ago, Magomed Abdussalamov, the heavyweight unbeaten, goes in there to fight against Mike Perez, ends up going into a coma after the fight.
True.
Mishaps with the way it was handled with the commission, monster lawsuit. New York has really changed and become stringent since then. A lot of people remember Deontay Wilder, Luis Ortiz won from last year after Wilder got rocked in that 7th round. Next round, the commission stopped the fight, took a long look in his eyes, all that. So I understand it's a BMF fight. Nate Diaz has a history of this. Nate Diaz was coming on. I understand the idea that how
you almost want the exception, right? You want the bending of you want it to go to the extremes because that's the way they set it up.
How the hell can you have a BMF championship and have it stop on a cut? And I get that. I get all the outrage. But you remember this. You remember UFC 202, Diaz McGregor 2? One of the best fights in UFC history, correct?
Yeah.
5 rounds on the feet the whole time. Do you remember what Dana said afterwards?
I don't.
He was like, I don't want a trilogy between these two. I don't want it anytime soon. I don't even know if I want it because these guys will never be the same. Did you see the way they went in there and fought? There was a part of me in round 3, even with Nate Diaz coming on, that I wondered if this fight went 2 more rounds, whether we were going to get into that scary territory where we want
I'm with you on that,
pure violence so bad, but do I kind of want it in a 3-round burst in this type of situation rather than a 5 and thinking about what his face could have looked like, what he would have been willing to walk through? And maybe there's people watching this right now that are like, what are you, a pansy? This is what it's all about.
Of course they are thinking that.
But
fickle audience.
In a weird way, this way that it stopped in both fighters' interest in a rematch could end up being a positive in the long run. And here's why. You ready for this, Chuck?
I'm ready.
Get ready for this. Let me wipe my sweat off right here and tell you.
Oh, boy.
Dana said the BMF would be a one-off pro wrestling thing to honor Nate and Jorge. And we're sort of going, you know what? There's something so pure about this idea. Not about the titles, just about 2 guys going in there and banging. We got to bang. Let's bang, right? That let's keep that championship going. Not everybody's in this game to chase the big belt. Some people in there just to make memories, the Arturo Gattis, the Justin Gaethjes. So
if the money's the same, why not?
I wanted to see that become a thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't this leave the potential that if they did a rematch, and if they put that title back on at stake, that this could turn into something? Do you want that as a fan?
I'm torn on it because I feel like the novelty of doing it as a one-off is really what brought people together. How does it stand if they do it again? There's also the weird expectation that comes with the BMF, right? Like you cannot go in there and become a grappler or become a wrestler and eke out a decision and just kind of control and grind a fight, right? Like that would not be the BMF. The spirit of the idea is that you're going to have 2 guys that come from like basically the streets and they want to bang on each other like what we're talking about. And I feel like to find those types of mentalities, which there are plenty, it's kind of a refined idea. How do we collectively embrace that going forward? And I feel like if they're going to do that, probably every weight class has a couple of guys you could do this. So maybe it should be like a baton working its way up and down the way. You know what I mean? Maybe it's one belt and it just kind of goes around like that. You win it and you don't hold it. Maybe it just goes on to the next guy. You know what I mean? Or something like that. That's the only way I can really see it working. I don't know if the novelty would be the same if they do this rematch. I don't know if it's going to have the same kind of buzz.
Here's the thing, though. This is a gift to the fans. The fan interest, I believe, would be insane. BMF championship fight each time they put this thing on the line. So it's interesting. But in terms of what could be next now, Jorge afterwards said, I love the quote. He was basically like, I come in here to flatline these guys. I come here to leave my opponents,
He lives up to the BMF, man.
And I love that he was willing to run it back. Nate kind of going off on the whole using the word fuckery a lot. Can we use that on the show?
Fuckery,
Jay, can we say fuckery
there was
on the
no
show?
C. It was just so however you want to pronounce that.
Jay has confirmed. Jay, don't mess with me today. I'm sweaty. But yeah, Jay confirms we can use
so let's use it.
Fuckery in here. But if you're UFC, Jorge Masvidal's star is massive, okay? What he showed us in that first round with those combinations, he's put his game to a level that I never thought he could get to.
Yeah.
Is it time to just let him wait for the winner of Usman and Colby Covington and plug him into that title shot and not really wait around for the BMF anymore?
I think so. I think it is. Here's the thing that we forget in this thing because of the stoppage. Masvidal was killing him. I mean, he went in there and he went in there just like he was embracing the role. He was doing it exactly right. He won those first 2 rounds going away. The reason it felt anticlimactic is because that third round, Nate Diaz started to come to life. People who know Nate Diaz, they know what he's capable of. They know he has these reserves in him. They know he can wear a guy down. He was starting to show that. His punches were starting to have some meaning behind them. They weren't the volume. All of a sudden, he's following up with big shots. I wanted to see where that was going, but I thought Masvidal was convincing enough in what we saw in those 3 rounds to basically be like, hey, he won the fight. I don't have any reservations that he didn't. Let him fight for the title. This dude's star. I've never seen something like this either. A guy who's been around for a decade who suddenly ascends to this level of stardom. I've never seen that.
And the cool part is, it's not just because of the 3-piece and soda. It's not just because of his personality or the marketing.
Yeah.
What the performance he showed against Nate in round 1, I thought Nate was going to give him problems. I did not see that. Fantastic performance. I actually agree with you. I think that we need to see him on the title level. If the default was a rematch of this, I'd take it. One more thing on Nate, real quick. We want to talk about, feeling good for Masvidal. Feeling good for Nate when he gets to announce his brother on the stage at the weigh-in and say, the greatest fighter in history. I mean, the cool, fan in you, it's just like, that's badass. It's great to have Nate walking out with him. I mean, it's full circle.
And just the fact that it was his idea. Let's not forget that. Everything that happened on Saturday night was Nate Diaz's idea. That's pretty big power, man. They said, we're wondering about being a needle mover. The guy, it's his invention. The whole thing was his invention.
Jay's going to kill me with one more thing on this topic.
Okay.
Dana afterwards says, Jorge Masvidal, fighter of the year. This locked it up. Your thoughts? Because I had a big debate with my editor at CBS Sports, Brandon Wise, about this.
Who does
Everyone
he say?
on my team is full on Jorge has done it. When I'm looking at fighter of the year, the first thing I'm looking at is who had the most important win.
Okay.
And then what do they have around that? How do you not have Israel Adesanya as your fighter of the year when he went in there against?
He'd be the only guy that would compete.
He went in there against a pound for pound ranked champion and knocked him out, and was in the fight of the year and won it, and sprinkle on top, beat Anderson Silva, all right?
So we saw him coming. If anything, he was a little more telegraphed. We knew that who he was last year, right? We knew he's coming up. Masvidal's was so out of left field, and this trajectory of going in, basically he's on the verge of a 3-fight losing streak in March of this year. Goes into that Till fight, which was designed, by the way, for Darren Till to win in London. It was supposed to get him back off the schneid. Steal that fight, go to the backstage, get into a second fight, baptize 2 fools in one night, have a third guy in town basically calling him out and putting his name into the mix, right? You had Ben Askren there, so then that fight becomes this big deal. We're paying attention to Masvidal on a whole different level as a gangster now. Goes in 5 seconds, takes out Ben Askren in one of the craziest scenarios that you can see, and then follows it up in this made-up belt at MSG against Nate Diaz with that performance. That's tough to overcome.
And I'm not trying to say it's not
a crazy
worthy.
Trajectory.
It's in the conversation. If you vote for it, I wouldn't kill you. But you got to be kidding me. So John 632
I'm kind of with you. It depends, right? It depends. How do you want to look at it?
John 632 just jumped in with a live comment wanting our thoughts if Jorge could beat the winner of Usman and Covington.
That's a toughie.
I don't see how you wouldn't think he's got a fighting chance with that performance against Nate.
He's so well-rounded that I wouldn't put it past him to be able to offset some of the wrestling, some of the doggedness, and some of the grind. But man, those two guys are very, very good at that. And you wonder. We've seen Masvidal lose to guys who fight like that before.
Yeah.
So I feel like it would be interesting. I want to see him, especially with his confidence where it is, and basically this this attitude of his. I want to see how that translates, because when you start to feel that way, when you feel invincible, I feel like you're capable of doing those type of things.
And let's not forget Marty, the one-man party. Beat Woodley if he beats Covington. He's in that conversation as well.